Hi, everyone, and welcome. Thank you so much for joining today's webinar, A New Data Hope, How to Conquer the Data Frontier in eDiscovery and Win. I'm Michelle Dernberger, Field Marketing Manager here at Cellebrite Enterprise Solutions, and I am thrilled to kick things off with you today. Before we dive in, just a few quick housekeeping notes to share. Yes, we are recording today's session. You will receive access to an on-demand version once the webinar wraps up. And remember, if you have any questions during the presentation, please feel free to drop them into the Q&A window. We'll tackle as many as we can during the live Q&A at the end of the webinar. And don't worry, if we do not get to your questions, we will follow up with you directly afterwards. Now, let's get to the good stuff. I am excited to introduce our two fantastic presenters today, Joshua Hickman and Andy Jacobs, two experts who are ready to guide us through today's data journey. Joshua Hickman is a digital forensics expert in the digital forensic unit line of business at Cellebrite. Previously, he was senior vice president with Kroll's cyber risk practice, the forensic scientist manager of the North Carolina Crime Lab's digital evidence section, and was a special agent with the North Carolina State Bureau of Investigation, where he concentrated on violent crimes and computer and internet-based crimes against children. Joshua also served as a police officer in his hometown. In his spare time, he conducts mobile digital forensic research and writes about it on his personal blog, The Binary Hick. I guess we're going to have to Google that and check it out. What a great name. And I'm happy to introduce our second speaker, Andy Jacobs. Andy Jacobs is a solutions engineer here with Cellebrite Enterprise Solutions, and he enjoys the challenges that come with complex litigation, and he focuses on digital forensics and eDiscovery. He has spent the past 10 years consulting law firms, service providers, and enterprises as an expert witness in digital forensics. As a man for others, he assesses the needs of his clients to provide critical feedback to posture them for success. He believes that management and preservation of data is a critical component to legal teams' arsenals. Andy now resides in Denver, Colorado, and can be found enjoying the mountains or the wonderful food scene around the state. Wherever he may be, you can find him cheering on his Ohio State Buckeyes and pestering his wife. Thank you all so much for joining us, and thank you to Josh and Andy. If you're ready, I'll hand it over to you, Andy, so we can get started.
Well, thanks for having us. And, I chatted with Josh on this, and the one thing that we really wanted to talk about was the left side of the EDRM. And so our agenda today is going to be, where do we start, Josh? Like, where do we have, when I call you and say, hey, I have this case. I don't know what this case is about. It's a lot of data. Maybe it's X, Y, and Z. Where do we even start? I don't even know where to look. And so that's why I want, Josh and I were, thinking over ideas, and this is where we were going to go. So our agenda today is, where do we start? What does data look like anymore? How does it go, on the left side of the EDRM? Because I think that, to me, that's one of the more important spots. And finally, any questions that come up, please let us know where we're at. So where does our investigation begin? I had Josh, you and I were talking, and I had a call come in one day, and it was, hey, Andy, I need you to collect everything over here. Just everything, right? I'm like, oh, okay. A lot of phone data, a lot of computer data. And I talked to the attorney, and it was, there's a lot of pictures on this device. There's a lot of videos. There's a lot of stuff that doesn't really look maybe relevant to the scope. Well, we need everything. And you and I were talking, and you told me a story the other day, and I was really curious if you could set that stage for us on, Josh, I'm calling you as the expert. How would you scope that call out? Like, can you give me some examples there? Is where I want to start.
Yeah, absolutely. And as it turns out, last night, this is like fresh up to date information. I had a colleague of my wife, who is also an attorney, contacted me last night about something like this. And so I will, share this story, because I think it's a good, just like the previous one was, it's really good at understanding like how this all kicks off, on where we come into play, right? he had a very specific, and I won't get too far down the weeds, but he had a very specific set of questions that he needed answered. And I waited for him to finish, and I said, okay, which one of those questions do you want me to be able to answer for you if you were to bring me, this person's phone? And he's like, well, all of them. I was like, okay, cool. And so I started rattling off these things. I was like, all right, let's see if we can't kind of further hone and scope and make your objective as targeted as possible. And I think that is where this is where it starts, right? This is the root. And if you mess this part up, the rest of it just kind of, will follow on after, and it could be ended up being like a hot mess and just, burning budget unnecessarily. And it just falls apart from there. So I think going into or coming to your expert with a very specific set of questions that you need answered to accomplish whatever objective you're trying to accomplish, that's where it starts. And I think that is the absolute most important thing. And there are other things too, but there's benefits to being very targeted in what you're trying to accomplish. You save budget, you save time, you get information back quicker versus give me all the things, right? I had a situation where I was sent to do a collection from a set of custodians, and one of the custodians, and this was a BYOB type shop. One of the custodians had no, that's okay. One of the custodians had, taken all of her wedding photos, and we can get into that a little bit later, but it just turned into an absolute nightmare from a collection standpoint.
And, I think data is just getting larger and larger, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But I remember the days when I had like my first cell phone, it was a picture was so small. And now when I get asked like, hey, can we get everything? Like that could be just an absolute large amount of data. We worked on this PowerPoint together. I couldn't send it via email because it was, it was just too big. It's things have just gotten large. So when you say I need everything, I think that's where the consultant needs to really get in there and say, okay, well, what exactly, when you mean everything, what you mean the relevant everything?
Right. And as a consultant, we're not trying to like pester you or bother you or be like naggy or anything. The reason we do that is to help you stay focused so you're as efficient as possible, not only from a monetary standpoint, but from a time standpoint too.
And I think it's one of my favorite parts about the EDRM in general is, we have this, it could be a large amount of volume on our left side. And to me, that's the most important side. Preservation is key in pretty much every case that we run into. Preserve the data in that state and time that's needed. And then, eventually we're going to get to that right side of the EDRM where it's the smaller amount of data set. But when I get that call, I need everything. It's, let's identify what we need. Let's preserve what we need. And let's finally get into a state that we can review what we need. And it's, what you were saying, it's costly. It can be, not just for your time, that expert's time. But then if we do need to get into a review platform, we need to parse that stuff out. It can take months to look at all that data. Between our emails bouncing back and forth, our phones, our laptops, our, social media, our cloud repositories anymore. You don't need, I always push back on that. I need everything comment.
Yeah. And the custodian who had taken her photo or taken her phone to her wedding, she literally shot all of her wedding photos. And part of that collection process, I ended up having to call the counsel back for the client and say, hey, this is going to take a long time. There's literally, almost a full terabyte of data sitting here. It's going to take a while to get. And, I explained to that counsel, it's like, not only do I have to get it, but then I got to get it into, they were using Relativity 1 at the time. I was like, I have to transmit that data up to a server somewhere. That's just additional time. But because it had not been, properly scoped, we ended up collecting that entire phone. And that was a ton of data.
I think one of the unsung heroes that I don't hear much about anymore, but always saved me was the custodian questionnaires. Like, where's this data saved? Okay, do we need this? Do we, darn it, Andy has access to that. He might save something there. Maybe we should go like that could, or he doesn't have access to that. So we don't need to pull that full server. We don't need to pull that full cloud repository. He only has access to these little. So those custodian questionnaires, I think, can be a fantastic way to, like you said, save time, save money off of that, and keep things going.
And from a counsel perspective, counsel may not necessarily be familiar with where all this data could possibly live. So the custodian really becomes that fulcrum in that entire process. As far as, like you said, even if you don't have like a formal questionnaire that you can ask, I mean, sit down with the person who owns that device. Where do you keep your data? Is there anywhere else? Is there another device in play? We don't know, but that person will know. People typically know where they keep their data, but even if they're not very specific, they can at least give you some inkling of an idea about where I need to go to do that. And then it becomes a three-way communication, right? Custodian, myself as an expert, and then counsel if that's in play too.
Just the way it runs downstream. And I thought this was kind of highly interesting. So a KPMG investigation, they had a report that was published that said there's 5 sources per custodian these days, at least from what they see. That can be a ton of data. And again, we talked about the custodian questionnaire, but I mean, we have any more computers. That's the low-hanging fruit, I think. Not much has changed there in our investigations. We have our link files, we have our USB history, but there's cloud now, which is, God, I ran a case where, I'll go to email too as a source, but a gentleman was syncing their Dropbox data from their server, logged in as Dropbox, and right-click sync instead of having the 3 files he normally used. Sync the whole thing, went home and just pulled everything. So if we were looking at, were they emailing themselves, X, Y, and Z? No. Okay. Well, there was no USB history. USB's locked down. There's so many ways anymore, and this, these data sets just keep growing. So we have our computers, we have our cloud sources, we have our mobile sources. Social media can be highly interesting depending on the case.
Right. It's interesting because you bring up the multi devices, and I think PCs, laptop or desktop, like you said, that becomes a low hanging fruit, right? Especially if we're talking a corporate environment where your security systems officers have got pretty good visibility into the environment, but these phones and tablets can really start becoming endpoints where there are no visibility. You mentioned the fact that your guy went out and uploaded stuff to himself or sent it over to Dropbox. And I can tell you, at least on the consulting side, I would see that often where, an organization had a bring your own device or BYOD type setup. A lot of times your personal data gets commingled in with business data, and it becomes a real headache, right? If you were to take a look at my phone right now, I have my Outlook for Cellebrite and some other things Cellebrite, but this is all on my personal phone. So, if I ever had to be collected for whatever reason, they're going to collect, a ton of memes that I have on my phone because I think they're hilarious, because I think I'm a hilarious person. But then, you're going to get forehead shots of my kid where he likes to grab my phone and take a bunch of selfies, and you can literally see him from here up. Well, you're going to get that. As a collection person, I would not want to collect that. That has no bearing on anything that I want to do. But because I've got multiple devices, I've got my personal device, I have my MacBook that's synced to my personal phone. So if you were to collect my phone for Cellebrite data, you would find stuff from my MacBook sitting there. And I literally have stuff laying all over the place. I have Dropbox, right? So to your point, not only are multiple physical devices in play, like this slide says, but you could probably have multiple cloud sources as well. You can just have data literally laying all over the place.
Which, you mentioned, forehead shots and stuff. And you as the examiner, I'm sure, we've all been there. You and I at least have been there, where I'm going to go on location and collect someone's data set. Okay. And we need everything. Well, if I'm pulling that full file system of a phone, I could be there for some time. That's costing you money. That's you time. That's costing my client money. And then if I'm going to have to go and upload all that to one of our favorite review platforms, now I'm having to go through all all of these pictures of just forehead shots that are taking up space in my review platform.
Right.
So now it's, the paralegal's time, the attorney's time, the analyst's time, and the storage space. So that's I think if we can scope things out a little bit better, and we don't need pictures off Josh's phone. It's out of scope for this. We don't care about Josh's pictures. Maybe we just go after these text messages. Maybe we just go after these emails. Maybe we just if we can start thinning that data set herd out, on the left side of the EDRM to the right, a little bit sooner. I think that saves everyone time. That's we also had a PwC survey that came in where it was 50% of cases take 3 to 6 months to complete. That's a lot of time where we could be doing other things. For these counsels and in-house counsel, these corporations. A lot of our listeners are they have other things to do other than dig through data and look at forehead shots. I like that. I'm going to use that one.
You're absolutely correct. I mean, we talk about the collection side a whole lot, but the review side comes in, that right side of the EDRM, really, that's also a place that can be a real, just time suck, really, for lack of a better term. Because if I have, a overly zealous collection, that's going to result in people having to, like you said, I've got interns, paralegals and other people. Again, that's time and money that is unnecessarily wasted when you could have been very targeted in your collection and culled down a lot of that data that I don't have to look at. So that's always a plus. Yeah, I mean, I saw personal photos all the time. It ran the gamut. And a lot of times that was just because I had to collect it because that's what the court was ordering us to do. It's part of some type of litigation or whatever.
Oh, yeah. And I think, it's just if we have, 5 devices or 5, sources of data, and we have 10 custodians. It's a lot of data sets we're going through. And it's funny. Like I said, I think data just keeps growing. I found a 256 megabyte flash drive in my drawer the other day. I know, right? Like,
yeah,
it's maybe hold one presentation on it, but it's like nowadays. I mean, phones used to be small.
Yeah,
I don't like a 1 terabyte Pixel or whatever. Like it's. Am I going to use any of that? No, it's all saved to the cloud anyways. But
yeah. I'm going to age myself in case the beard's not doing it right. My first computer had 4
looks
gig.
Good. I like it.
Oh, thanks, man. I appreciate it. My first PC had 4 gigs of storage. That's all it had. And the baseline phone now has I don't know how many orders of magnitude more storage space than my first PC, which this day just boggles my mind. But it's absolutely crazy. How much?
And you're reviewing that. Our attorneys are reviewing that. Our paralegals are reviewing that. And all that's going to our favorite review platforms. And it's just like you said, a time suck. And if we can pinpoint what we need a little bit earlier, custodian questionnaires, or maybe having conversations with people, if we do have that luxury, because again, I don't want to have to come to your house and collect a 1 terabyte phone and then all this stuff, and you're going to be staring over my shoulder of like, hey Andy, can you leave? It's like dinner time.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I'm ready to go home from work, right? It's if you're in a corporate setting and I've had to send someone from my team to go do a collection, you're holding me up from going home, right? I'm still on the clock. You're holding me here, right? You're paying me to sit there and twiddle my thumbs while someone is collecting data off of my phone. So, all of these ancillary effects that happen because we're collecting data that's not needed at the end of the day, you have to take all of these things into consideration.
I think that goes to our data governance side, which is the far left. Who has access to what? And it was funny. I was at a company and just started, and I noticed I had access to my HR profile.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and I selected that folder. It's like, oh, now I have access to a few other things I probably shouldn't, and raise the concern. But it's like different audits, who has access to what? Where does this data live? What we talk a lot about phones. We are Cellebrite. We love our phones, and I think phones are the next frontier. You mentioned earlier, laptops and desktops really haven't changed much, but there's still this, the data network side of things of who has access to what, and that data governance. I mean, heck, my buddy's got a phone where he has 2 different profiles, one for work, one for his personal use.
Yeah.
And IT can go and just, if need be, wipe that work side of things. So keeping that separate, but it's the reach is there, and who has access to what, I think, is a very big. It's a spot that maybe is overlooked, but there should be no reason I have access to my CEO's full SharePoint. But Lord knows there's companies, companies that are listening. Please make sure you keep an eye on, make sure that folks, do your audits, do your checks, keep things locked down, and again, wherever that data might live, because again, if I have access to all these places, I might be sneaking and hide something there before I leave.
Right. I think that the previous slide actually had something that kind of touches on this, and that we talk about the accountability, the accountability of actually just holding the data that we collect, right? And you touched on it just a second ago about the regulatory things that we have to take into consideration. Regardless if I'm collecting from a phone or PC or tablet or whatever the digital storage is, cloud. Once you collect it, you were responsible for it at that point, right? Think about all the regulatory requirements that come with data storage and processing. GDPR is like huge. My wife, her company has a very large footprint in EMEA, and she had to get spun up very quickly on what GDPR requirements were as far as like data processing, handling, where it needs to go, wherever it is in the globe. But even internally, even if you collect it, even from an employee, there could still be some PII or Lord forbid, PHI, or some other intellectual property that you've now collected. Some of it may belong to your organization. Some of it may not, right? You may have a bring your own device type setup where I have personal and professional data commingled. Well, even though I should not have had my personal data on there for whatever reason, I'm still responsible for it if I collect it and store it, right? Yep. And so, like you mentioned, like who's got access to these things? Does it need to be open? Does everybody need to have? Absolutely not, right? You could have a disclosure requirement based on your regulatory requirements wherever you are. We have a multitude of data handling and regulatory requirements here in the U.S., but North Carolina, which is where I'm based out of, has actually something that's written into the general statutes. Outside of like civil stuff, there is a criminal component to it as well. So you have to take all of these things into consideration, because once you collect it, you own it until such time that you have disposed of it, according to whatever guidelines you may have.
And that's fair. I mean, if we start doing backups after backups after backups of, your phone or my email or whatever, that can really grow. I mean, it depends if it's, full backup where it's every day I'm doing my 10, gig PST or whatever.
Right.
I mean, you said, who has access, or heaven forbid there's a breach or something.
Yeah.
And it's.
Yeah. I'll use my wife again as an example, because she loves when I do this.
Does she know?
No. Oh yeah. I tell her all the time. It's fine. She's a willing participant. I'll just leave it at that. So, she actually uses her personal or her professional laptop, so the laptop that she was issued by her organization. I see her all the time, like checking her personal Gmail. Like I'll walk down the office and I'll just happen to, hey, what's going on? And I'll see Gmail open. I know that's not work. She uses, they're a Microsoft 365 shop. Like, that irks me as a professional, like in our space, that irks me to no end. Like you should never, streams should never cross.
Is that how you're getting something gray?
Yes, absolutely. Between that and my kid. But it irks me because I came up, you don't commingle your data, but I think that is a reality now. People do it, and we just have to take that into account when we start talking about data handling and collection.
I'm on your side on this one. I keep everything separate, because I know darn well, if anything, we've lived it. Where my wife kind of does the same thing. She's an IT nerd, and it's love her to death. I'm like, honey, why are you
Yeah.
why do you have a personal Slack on your work machine? Like, it's, well, I can chat you easily. I'm like, oh God, Edge.
You just die a little inside when you see it, right? It just, that's part of it.
And she'll ask me, really, what and they know what we do, and it's, like, honey, okay. It's,
yeah. But it's, from a collection perspective, like you said, you and I have dealt with this probably, a million times, but that is just a reality of things. Especially, you get hired at a new job, they issue a couple of devices, there could be some commingling, and you just have to take that into account and work around it.
Maybe your case that you mentioned before, all these photos and whatnot, if that was maybe a work phone, maybe it was a really nice phone they issued, better camera.
That's right. Yeah. So yeah, you're right. That's a great point, right? Even if it's just a company owned device and I'm not supposed to use it for personal reasons, it's gonna happen. So yeah, I think going into collection and really review and everything and presentation, all of that, we have to go in with our eyes open and understand that, yeah, there's a good likelihood that I'm going to see some type of protected data type sitting there, and I have to take appropriate safeguards to make sure that I don't get myself in trouble, right? And
before I go to the next topic, I'm going to hit on that custodian questionnaire again, because I think they've saved so much time, and it's, darn it, maybe I do use my personal laptop every now and then when I travel to check work email, because just log in, like, crap, I do send some text messages to clients, or they'll have my personal number. I do that, don't I? Where it's like, now this just went into the fold.
I have a ton of people that I used to work with in the law enforcement space that still contact me on my personal phone with Cellebrite related questions. So yeah, absolutely, it happens.
And we were talking, a lot of phones. I still think computers are great. I mean, we're on one right now. I think there's sure, there's your USB history. There's always these footprints on computers. Everyone gets issued one. I might not get issued a phone. Did you get issued a phone? I got a test phone, I guess, but everyone gets issued a laptop or a desktop. While they're office. So it's plenty of ways to stem from, okay, our cloud drives, our SharePoints, all of that is tied to my my laptop, my desktop, and where I think mobile phones are that final. Well, I don't want to say final, because we have AI coming down the line. There's never a final frontier.
No, there's always something else.
There's always something, but I still think phones are that wealth of knowledge. I mean, they track everything. They know how high, the altimeter on my device. Yeah. They know how fast I'm going. They know what networks I'm on. I think computers being that low hanging fruit, there's a lot of data there that can make a case or break a case right off the bat.
Yeah, some people do not have a traditional computing device, if you think about it, right? Some people may not even definitely PC. If it wasn't for my job here, I would not have this PC sitting next to me. If it wasn't for my job, I actually would not own a laptop. I could survive. I can do everything I need to get done on a tablet. It's not niche necessarily, but like you said, it's that low hanging fruit. These things have been around for a long time now.
Not much has changed.
No, they haven't really. If you think about it, Windows, right? Mac OS, these things in some form or fashion have been around for quite some time. Linux, right? Or Unix before that. So, to your point, these phones, and I've got a ton of them sitting on my desk, these are they're very personal devices, right? If you think about it, I would walk out of the house and make sure I've got my wallet, my keys.
Oh, you do the pat now.
You do your pat. Now, when I do my pat, I'm checking my back pocket to make sure my phone's back there too, because I don't want to walk out of the house without it. And
I go to the gym. I have my phone with me for my music. Right. I go, to the airport. I'm scrolling on probably a social media because I don't really do that at home.
Right.
And my laptop stays in my laptop bag. I bring it if I need it.
Right. And you think about all the things that you do on your phone, right? Outside of things you mentioned, like I pay bills on my phone, right? I make doctor's appointments on my phone. Yeah. I've fallen into that newer generation where, I don't like talking to people on the phone, so I would rather just send a text message. I get what the hype is about now, but a lot of people communicate in that way.
It could be a text. It's like some of these calls could be an email. I see where you're going.
Yeah, that's exactly the sentiment, right? Think about that from a data collection perspective, right? It's hard to collect a phone call. I can collect the phone, I can see that a phone call is made, but if you're like me and you do most of your transactions via text, that's better than a phone call, right? There's communication. I can even see the contents of the communication.
Oh, and the metadata behind it, who's texting who, when did it come in, was it received? I mean, that's a whole nother conversation on metadata.
Yep.
I do think computers are a great place to start. Again, it's that easy place to start. Mm-hmm. Every analyst knows how to do USB history if they're a decent analyst. Everyone knows how to look at the created access modified dates. There's a lot there that link to things. I'm a big fan of link files because it's going to show me really what my machine was doing, when, where, and how.
Right. And on top of that too, our phones are syncing with our computers now.
Heck, anymore. I mean, now where you wouldn't have a computer, I would, because World of Warcraft is actually still around, and I need my computer for that.
It's a good point. That's a good point. That's a valid reason. I will allow it.
Thank you, sir. Which I do want to talk about. We talked a little bit on computers for fun. Cloud has been everywhere. And I mentioned my case where someone did Dropbox and they sync things over. So these audit logs, the return of the audit logs, if you will. Not to be confused with anything else that returns with audit logs. These cloud-based repositories are everywhere. I mean, we share things. SharePoint. You said the missus is a Microsoft shop. Mm-hmm. So there's SharePoint, all of the things. There's Dropbox, there's Box. My Google Drive is synced to my phone. iCloud. How many times did the cloud aspect of it? How many times did you have a case where it was, I don't have my phone anymore, I lost it in a boating accident?
Yeah, I had a really interesting, and actually I did this one. It's one of those things where you do the job well one time and then word gets out and then they come back and want you to do that again in some other case, right? I actually had this happen several times where a potential client would say, okay, we're interested in WhatsApp message history. Can you recover deleted data? And my question back to them would be, maybe, if did they back their stuff up to the cloud? Because a lot of these applications, and even third party and native, they really harass you to back things up to the cloud, right? And to the point, they're so persistent. Like, I'll be like, finally, yes, just get off my case about sending this. Fine, I will do it. Yep. This individual was backing their stuff up, their WhatsApp messages back up to their G drive. And what ended up happening, we had a very long event horizon as a result, because what I did is I had an exemplar device where I could sign into that person's Google account, pull down the WhatsApp history and restore it to a phone and see messages that were going back for years. And, that the whole thing that facilitated that was the cloud aspect of that. Things are getting sent up there. Sometimes users are aware of it. Sometimes users are not, but it's something that we have to take into account.
Well, the missus and I, we have a shared Google Drive, and it's, the pictures get backed up automatically. It's great. There's a lot of easy things with it, but it's, that side of it too. It's like, everything is tethered to some cloud platform anymore.
Yeah. People, I mean, if you don't sign into iCloud on an iPhone, oof.
They yell at you.
Yeah, it yells constantly. It is not a pleasant experience. To me, it's almost to the point where I don't even want to use this phone anymore. Fine, I'll sign in. I was teaching last week, and one of my fellow instructor, she mentioned, she's like, I don't pay for any extra cloud, storage, because I do all local backups to my workstation. I'm like, wow, you're definitely showing your age.
Impressive.
But that's how she managed her data. That backup was going to a MacBook that was probably syncing to iCloud. So it's possible that those backups were still up there anyway. But yeah, I mean, cloud.
When you put it that way, that rabbit hole of, okay, even though I'm not syncing my phone to the cloud, I'm putting it on the computer, which is going to the
Right. It's like Inception, right? I mean, it just kind of goes on and on and on. And that from a collection perspective, and really when you interview your custodian, that's kind of, you got to be thinking on those levels. Like think of all the places that data could possibly get and maybe multiply that by 3 or something. And then you've actually probably got the true answer, right? I can put something somewhere and it may, and I may know about it, I may not as a user, but it may spider out and go in other places as well.
When it's, I mean, heaven forbid you say, well, you look up one thing, cloud again, you look up one thing on your phone, and how many times do you scroll through Facebook or any social medias, and it's like that one thing you looked up is now everywhere.
Yeah.
It's that spider web of data.
Wherever you're signed in, just make the assumption that it's there. And I think part of that scoping process is trying to determine, okay, custodian, what services do you use? And don't just limit it to like, the biggies, iCloud, Dropbox, G Drive. Think of other things, Mega. That application wants to sync literally everything that you own to their back end. OneDrive, both corporate and personal.
Yeah.
And so, you have to kind of think about where could this data possibly go? It could go anywhere.
We talked about phones because we are, I think phones, like I said, maybe not the final frontier, but I know, we do the pat down. I have my wallet, my phone, and my keys. Don't go anywhere without my phone. And there's so much data on these darn devices anymore where was the phone unlocked? It knows. Like you and I can figure, I know you can, maybe I can. You could figure out, was the phone unlocked at a certain time? What app was used during that time? Fitness trackers, wife's been dragging me hiking more to get in shape. So Strava, I'm a big Strava fan now. And it tracks, the altimeter of your snowboarding. We're out in Denver. There's data everywhere. And if we did a trend survey, and in 97% of eDiscovery cases, at least have one phone. Now, I need to talk to Cellebrite, who did this survey, and see if that's accurate, because I have a work phone and personal phone now. If you said that commingling, I could easily see this number growing.
Oh yeah. I one of the things I dealt with at Kroll a lot of times was network intrusion and ransomware. Like ransomware is just a nasty thing, but even as something you think ransomware, okay, like attacker got in, they ransomed the environment. As it turns out, I saw phones that came into play every so often with these types of cases, because it's like it was mentioned before. Most of your security team is probably going to have pretty good visibility into laptops and desktop devices, but this becomes an additional endpoint that you may not have visibility, and that's mobile device management, whole other topic, but that's where MDM really comes into play. But it is something to consider. A lot of people, especially those that may have some type of public presence, think about LinkedIn, for example. I could use generative AI to craft some type of message that goes out to a person's phone and continuously talk to them to the point where I have now gotten a set of credentials that I can access an environment. So it's, phones are absolutely an attack surface. So, both for things like ransomware, but also for other types of cases, think about intellectual property theft, or I have a individual who has left my organization who took the client list with them. Well, how do they do it? They used their phone and they got it out of there. So,
there's so many ways to do it. Is it just taking pictures? Is it, someone may be leaving and it's, be my next, maybe topic here in a minute. But if 97% of eDiscovery cases now have one phone, I would like to talk to whoever pulled that number, because I think it's going to grow. I mean, I have a work phone, personal phone, and then you have a tablet, which is still a mobile device. Now that could be 3 mobile devices. Like the way it grows. I mean,
you start getting out to that 5 device, that 3 devices per person type situation, right?
Oh goodness!
It's crazy.
Wow, now you make me think. I have 3 mobile devices. Oh, jeez. Do I have more mobile devices than computers? That's something
I actually do, and I do. Like I have a phone, a MacBook, a tablet, and then I just have the big PC for Cellebrite related things. So yeah.
World of Warcraft related things. That's not mine.
Hey, same, man. It counts.
You know, on the phone side of things, you know, I want to pick your brain on the different collection methods, because if we're talking the left side, the EDRM, and where do we really get in here in preservation? This is actually a screenshot from my old phone, my Galaxy. There's a lot of junk on there, if I'm looking correctly. I mean, we have we have Facebook, we have Signal, we have Discord. I mean, there's a lot of different apps that I use, and you and I might talk on Signal for a minute, then we'll switch over to Discord for a minute and continue that conversation, because it's just the next app. And there's a lot of technology out there that allows us to, put all those communication or conversations together in one thread from these different apps. And I think it's amazing. But you mentioned the point of how does, maybe data exfil. I think a lot of people talk. Hey, we used to work together long ago. Do you remember that one project we worked on? Can you give me, what was that again? Who was that client? Oh yeah, that one.
Yeah, and think about it. I need to collect these sources, right? It's part of my collection process. If the concern is data exfil, whether it be intellectual property or just again a client list, right, or contact information, something I should not be sending to someone else. Just assume that individuals, like you said, they're talking. Where they're talking really just becomes a matter of what third-party applications, which you got a few listed here. Sure, we offer the ability for Teams, or I use that Teams, but we offer Microsoft Teams, as a part of corporate way to chat internally. In a corporate environment, we have Slack as well, right? Zoom has got a chat function, but I kind of think of this like my kid, right? If I tell my kid you can't do X, Y, and Z, he's going to go out and do A, B, and C, right? Until you tell him he can't, or he gets his hand slapped, right? And I think that this is a good example of that. I know that the corporate overlords or whoever are looking at, Teams communications. They're auditable if I go to the 365 console, right? They can't do that to Signal. They can't do it to Telegram. They can't do it to WhatsApp. So you will find a lot of times employees will be using these third-party chat applications to discuss business-related matters. It happens.
It's funny. So I'm at a conference in New York. I was at a conference yesterday, and I presented on a panel, and I moderated the panel. And my first question was, how many of you, hands up, send text messages? Of course, everyone's hand went up. How many of you use a third-party app for those text messages, like a Telegram or a Signal? One or two went down. And it's I remember when I was, first getting phones and stuff, you had your Verizon text messaging app.
Yep.
And, then it was, the native Google app, and now it's Signal and Session, and, how these things expand. And you're an Android or an iPhone user. I'm an Android user, and I don't have the bubbles that you have, or the read notifications like iMessage, but I use Signal with the missus, and she likes it because she gets to yell at me when I look at an app, look at the notification, and says I read it, and I never respond.
You're on the read receipts,
right?
Yeah.
I mean, there's so many different ways, and it's we'll send something on Discord because maybe she's on her computer doing something, or there's just all these. I have some apps on my desktop to communicate with our colleagues, across the country, across the world, that maybe I can't text, and darn it, we're talking about that. I mean, there's these different chat applications that are cloud based, like we discussed before, that end up on my okay, if I lost my phone, maybe I can pull from my computer. Everything's backed up somewhere.
That's right. And you brought up a good point. A lot of times, SMS, we talk about SMS. How many people are using text messages? Well, at least here in the U.S., and I know elsewhere in globally, this is starting to happen. Is you're starting to see the rise of RCS, or Rich Communication Service. It is the successor to SMS. The technology has been around for a very long time, but Google has really taken that mantle and ran with it as far as like getting people to adopt it. And a lot of, they're using this technology that, before I could get SMS messages from an AT&T, a Verizon, insert your service provider here. But now with RCS, that's not something that's available. That is encrypted end to end.
Yep.
They have no more visibility into it. For iPhones, it looks like I'm talking to a green bubble, but I can clearly see it's RCS. The same things apply. You get read receipts. I'm not compressing media as it's going through like it did before. So, the days of going to the service provider to pull SMS, those are slowly coming to an end because of this technology that has been around for some time, but is now starting to see mainstream uptake. So, that, again, another consideration that you have to have.
And I think every case is different, and obviously, we talked a lot about, let's try to target the data, let's narrow it down. We don't need everything. I mean, I had one person ask me, just give me everything that looks out of place or anything that looks interesting.
Right.
Darn it, they have all these Excel files on their. I mean, it might be part of their job. I don't how much. So
yeah,
we talked about a lot of that, but one thing I wanted to discuss was how that scope expands. And if we're going to the middle of the EDRM, you, the expert, are kind of doing your analysis now, and we have our databases, we have our unencrypted our encrypted data sets. We talked Signal before. I think that's the easy one because it's all over. It's pretty popular.
Right.
But we have our parsed data sets, our unparsed data sets. And if the scope goes that way, Josh, I need, all messages. I don't need everything, but I need all messages. What workflow would you use on that? Would that be a full file system and pull keychains?
Yeah, at that point, I think so. And I think this is a testament to the, people. A lot of people are paying attention to privacy now. And from a person who uses it, this technology, I'm all for it. I like to be able to do certain things on my phone, banking, sending information about, a doctor's appointment about my kid or, what have you. The encryption and this protection provides that, that overhead that helps us get these things done in a safe manner. However, that being said, as a digital forensic practitioner, it irritates me to no end because now I have to deal with these things. So to say that I'm conflicted is accurate. But I think at the end of the day, I would be more, I definitely fall more so on the side of privacy without a doubt. I think that is something that everybody has the right to. But to your question, at that point, if I'm starting to talk about text messages, I don't, if I've got a good idea about what I'm looking at, then I may need to do a secondary extraction. But if it's messaging, I'm probably going to go for that full file system because I may only get one swing at it as far from a collections perspective.
Sure.
And I better go ahead and just get it all if I'm able to do so. Now, I know that kind of seems a little contradictory about scoping, but again, that's where scoping really comes into play. If I know that messages are something that my client needs, absolutely, I'm getting a full file system because that's the only way I'm going to be able to get not only the data structures that I need from a data storage perspective, but also if I'm dealing with an app that has its data encrypted at rest, then it becomes a matter of like, okay, I'm going to need the credentials, obviously, to get into those data structures.
No, and that's a good point because we talked about maybe trying to collect less data and how do we do the scope to get to we don't need everything. Right. And that's when you, the expert, can go, okay, I'm the your missus is an attorney, and she says, hey, we don't need pictures for this case. We don't need, but we have this pile to pull from, and darn it, I don't need to go back because if you and I are we see that we're on Discord and hey, check your Signal messages. Darn it, we didn't collect that.
Get Signal, right?
And in our side of the house, we only get so much time with a phone. I mean,
you may only get one swing at it, and you have to always keep that in mind. Not only from a perspective of the custodian becomes unavailable for whatever reason, right?
Oh, yeah.
But the custodian may still remain available, but that data, the phone may become unavailable at some point. Like you said, it may end up in a toilet somewhere. it's damn right. Yeah, it becomes damaged. Right? We've damaged it.
Luckily, like you said before, though, maybe it's backed up to the cloud, but also are those encryption keys backed up to? There's so many different instances where it's I'd rather have it and not need it than not.
Right, and I think that's where you have to lean on your expert to understand how these things work under the hood, so to speak, right? Where
good way to
does the
put it.
data live? But like, how do these third-party applications operate? Generally speaking, I don't have to be like getting down to, the bits of the matter, but I just need to have a general idea. And I think for those that have to engage experts in that fashion, I think that's where you really have to lean on your expert, whoever that person is, to tell you, so you can make an informed decision about next steps.
There's so much to do on these phones. There's so much, for these attorneys and corporations to manage. We talked desktops, laptops earlier, but it's expanding in so many different ways with cloud applications. And finally now we have social media on these devices, and
right.
And how many times has there been have we seen corporate leaks on social media, or some insiders doing X, Y, and Z and is posting, and I think everyone talks. It's people like to brag. I think people like to have fun with things. People get in trouble because they talk, and when you have social media to hide behind, there's just so much. And like, to me, I don't log into what do we have up here? Twitter. I don't log into Twitter on my desktop. I don't log into Instagram on my desktop. But if I'm at the airport and my flight's delayed, you know what I'm doing? I'm looking at different recipes on Instagram. Different, smoking meats or whatever. There's so much. Reddit. On how many how to change my hiking structure or my new backpacking set. Like, there's so much to do on social media, and it's all tied to your phone. Well, a lot of it's tied to your phone.
A lot of it's tied, right? And I think the other thing to remember too is that each one of these that you've got up here. So we've got Blue Sky, Reddit, Instagram, Facebook, and X or Twitter. Each one of these applications actually have a one-to-one communication, so direct messages, right? But if you think about these platforms, especially Blue Sky, for example, and I think X is a good one. I mean, these are micro blogging websites. At the end of the day, that's their essence, right? And so we have a one-to-many type communication mode. And to your point, I may inadvertently disclose something I should not have, right? I may have some access to some type of sensitive data, or I may disclose enough information about myself online to where I've now become a target for some type of, targeting phishing campaign, right? I see all the personal data that gets disclosed on LinkedIn, for example. Like if you were to look at my LinkedIn, you could see, I was here, I went to school here, I did all these things. You could possibly craft something to target me. And I think a lot of people forget that a lot of times. So again, to your point, be careful what you're disclosing online, not only from a personal perspective, but definitely for work.
I worked on a slip and fall, and again, I'm out in Colorado, so we have a lot of mountains around. I worked on a slip and fall, and this person was suing, they fell and whatever, but they kept posting that they were skiing up in the mountains.
Right.
It doesn't really help when you're bragging about you're not working and you hurt so bad. But look at that snowboarding trick you just pulled off. The same day that you slipped. Whatever. People just seem to maybe everyone's different, but be careful on what you post. It could come back to haunt you.
But I mean, this is great. It becomes another source of data that you may have to collect because it may help you accomplish whatever objective that you have. In your case, I'm sure there's probably some potential litigation going on there. That now becomes a very critical piece of information if I am, the defendant in that particular case. And so that is something else I now need to collect.
And there's so much on social media, and I think depending how we get there, social media is another, and that's a whole nother webinar. And I think there's a few things we wanted to finish up with, and I like your point of trust your experts. Trust, talk to these people that know these tools. Use your custodian questionnaires on maybe where does this data live? What do we do? Where does it go? Like we were mentioning, different chat applications. We can put them all together. So, trust your experts is where I'm going to leave it. Josh, you have any final words for us? I see we do have some questions as well.
Yeah, I think the trust your experts one was really good, but I think the takeaway here is, when you're going into an engagement, whatever that is, come in with a set of objectives in mind, right? That helps you scope the type, not only the amount of data, but the type of data that you need to collect and probably later review. So a little work up front will save you a ton of work on the backside.
I like it. That's why we talked, I love the left side of the EDRM, because it's, if we can define what we need, we define our scope. There's no, maybe no need to go back to the well. There's no need to call our custodians again and interrupt,
Right.
If we're taking months to work on some of these cases and, we have to go back to that, interrupt, another 50 people in the office. That's a lack of production. That's a lot of money.
Right.
A lot of money.
Right.
I saw we did have a few questions come in. What do you got for us?
Yes, thank you so much, guys. Yes, we did have a few questions come in. Let's start with the following question. With the move to Passkey and the Authenticator app, are you seeing an impact on collection and processing of cell phones and other materials? Andy, you want to take that one?
That cat and mouse game,
Yeah.
With the way technology grows and trying to get data, and you mentioned privacy earlier, it's always the stretch of it, though.
Right.
I saw your message. I have searched public social media before to track down potential witnesses. That's fantastic. Like that spider web of where people are and whatnot. So,
yeah, another source of info.
Oh, there's so much.
Wow, guys, time really flew by. We're just about out of time, so we'll go ahead and wrap things up here. Now, if we didn't get to your question during the session, don't worry. As we said, we'll be following up with you individually after the webinar to make sure you get all the answers you need. And I just want to give a big shout out to everyone for joining us today. We really hope that you found this webinar valuable and inspiring. And remember, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us here at enterprisemarketing@cellebrite.com, or you can reach out to our two fabulous presenters at their email on the screen. Thank you all so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us. Take care.